guys. This is Monday's reading of Ivan. We are on page 208, and then you're going to do a little bit of an assignment on the characteristics of one of the characters that you want to choose. So that will be up to you, okay? We're starting on page 208, and we're going to read up to page 228. 208 is a repeat page, which is kind of good because it lets us know where we ended off at the end of last week, okay? This chapter is called Angry. Thump. The sound, my sound, echoes through the mall. George and Julia spin around. Julia drops her backpack. George drops his keys. The pile of pictures goes flying. Thump, thump, thump. I bounce off the walls. I screech and bellow. I beat and beat and beat my chest. Bob hides under knot tag, his paws over his ears. I'm angry at last. I have someone to protect. Puzzle pieces. After a long while, I grow quiet. I sit. It's hard work being angry. Julia looks at me with wide, disbelieving eyes. I'm panting. I'm a little out of shape. What the heck was that? George demands. Something's really wrong, Julia says. I've never seen Ivan act this way. He seems to be calming down, thank goodness, George says. Julia shakes her head. He's still upset, Dad. Look at his eyes. My pictures are scattered all over the floor like huge autumn leaves. Okay, there's another simile, guys, comparing his papers like autumn leaves that are scattered all over. What a mess, George says, sighing. Wish I hadn't bothered sweeping tonight. Do you think Ivan's okay? Julia asks. Probably just a temper tantrum, George says. He reaches under a chair to retrieve a brown and red picture. Can't say I blame the guy, stuck in that tiny cage all these years. Julia starts to answer, but then she freezes. She cocks her head. She stares at her feet, where my pictures lie in disarray. Dad, she whispers, come see this. I'm sure he's another Rembrandt, George says. Let's pick these up and get going, Jules. I'm exhausted. Dad, she says again, seriously, look at this. George follows her gaze. I see blobs, many, many blobs, along with the occasional swirl. Please, can we go home now? That's an H, Dad. Julia kneels down, straightening one picture, then another. That's an H, and here, she grabs more pictures. Put this one here, and I don't know, maybe that one. You have an E. George rubs his eyes. I hold my breath. Julia is running now. She picks up one picture, sets down another. It's like a puzzle, Dad. There is something. It's a word, maybe words, and a picture of something. A giant picture. Jules, George says, this is crazy. But he's looking at the floor too, wandering from picture to picture and scratching his head. H, Julia says. E, O, ho? Julia chews her lower lip. H-E-O, and that looks a lot like an I. H-E-O-I? George writes in the air with his finger. I-E-O-H? Not the letter, an actual I. And that's a foot, or maybe a tree, and a trunk, Dad. I think that's a trunk. Julia runs to my window. Ivan, she whispers, what did you make? I stare back. I cross my arms. This is taking much longer than I thought it would. Humans, sometimes they make chimps look smart. And you know how Ivan feels about chimps. He thinks they're slimy. Finally, Julia and George take the picture to the ring, where there's room to see them all. An hour passes as they try to assemble my puzzle. Ruby's awake now, and she and Bob and I watch. Ivan, Ruby says, is that a picture of me? Yes, I say proudly. Where am I supposed to be? That's a zoo, Ruby. See the walls and the grass and the people looking at you? Ruby squints. Who are all those other elephants? You haven't met them yet, I say. You haven't met them, I say, yet. It's a very nice zoo, Ruby says with an approving nod. Bob nudges me with his cold nose. It is indeed. In the ring, Julia pumps her fists in the air. Yes, she cries. I told you, Dad. There it is. Home. Home. George gazes at the letters. He spins around to look at me. Maybe it's just a coincidence, Jules. You know, a once in a trillion kind of thing, like that old saying about the chimp and the typewriter. Give him long enough and he'll write a novel. I make a grumbling noise, as if a chimp could write a letter, let alone a book. Then how do you explain the rest of it? Julia demands. The picture of Ruby in the zoo. How do you know it's a zoo? George asks. See the circle on the gate? There's a red giraffe in it. George squints and tilts his head. Are you sure that's a giraffe? I was thinking more along the lines of a deformed cat. It's the logo for the zoo, Dad. It's on all their signs. Explain that. George gives her a helpless smile. I can't begin to. I'm just saying there has to be a logical explanation. Look at how big this is. Julia puts the last piece of Ruby's right ear into place. It's huge. It is definitely large, George agrees. Julia watches me. She chews on her thumbnail. I see the question in her eyes. She turns back to the paintings and stares at them, looking, truly looking. A slow smile dawns on Julia's face. Dad, she says, I have an idea, a big idea. Julia races around the edge of my painting, her arms spread wide. Billboard big. I'm not following you. I think this is meant to be on a billboard. That's what Ivan wants. George crosses his arms over his chest. What Ivan wants? He repeats slowly. And you know this because you two have been chatting? Because I'm an artist and he's an artist. Uh-huh, says George. Julia clasps her hands together. Come on, Dad, I'm begging you. George shakes his head. No, I'm not doing that. No billboard, no way. I'll get the ladder, Julia says. You get the glue. I know it's dark out, but the billboard's lit. Mac will fire me, Jules. Julia considers. But think of the publicity, Dad. Everybody would know about Ruby. You want me to put up a sign that shows Ruby in a zoo with the word home on it in giant letters? George gestures towards my pictures. A sign, incidentally, that just happens to have been made by a gorilla? Exactly. And you want me to do it without Mac's permission? George asks. Exactly. No, George says. No way. Julia goes to the edge of the ring, careful not to step on any of my paintings. She picks up Mac's claw stick. She walks back and hands it to her father. George runs a finger along the blade. She's just a baby, Dad. Don't you want to help her? But how would it help, Jules? Even if lots of people see Ivan's sign, it doesn't mean anything's going to change. I'm not exactly sure yet, Julia shakes her head. Maybe people will see the sign and they'll know this isn't where Ruby belongs. Maybe they'll want to help too. George sighs. He looks at Ruby. She waves her trunk. It's a matter of principle, Dad. Principal. L-E, George corrects. Dad, Julia says softly, what if Ruby ends up like Stella? George looks at me, at Ruby, at Julia. He drops the claw stick. The ladder, he says quietly, is in the storage locker. The next morning, I watch Mac's car slam to a halt in the parking lot. He leaps out. He stares at the billboard. His jaw is open. He doesn't move for a long time. So what do you think Mac is thinking when he sees that billboard? Mad human. A mad gorilla is loud, but a mad human can be loud too, especially when he is throwing chairs and turning over tables and breaking the cotton candy machine. Phone call. Mac is kicking a trash can across the food court when the phone rings. He answers it, red face and sweating. What the? He demands. He glares at me. I don't know what you're, he starts to say, but then he stops to listen. Who? Julia who? He asks. Oh, sure, George's kid. She's the one who called you? More talking. With the phone to his ear, Mac comes closer to my cage, eyeing me suspiciously. Yeah, he says. He paints. Sure. We've been selling his art for quite a while now. There is another long pause. Yeah, absolutely. It was my idea. Mac nods. A smile starts at the corner of his mouth. Photos? No problem. You want to see him in action? Come on down, have a look. We're open 365 days a year. Can't miss us. We're right off of I-95. Mac picks up the overturned trash can. Yeah, I think I'll be adding more pictures. It's what do you call it? A work in progress. When the call is done, Mac shakes his head. Impossible, he says. An hour later, a man with a camera comes to take my picture. He is from the local paper, the one Julia called. How about you take one of me with the elephant, Mac suggests. He drapes his arm around Ruby's back, grinning as the camera clicks. Perfect, the man says. Perfect, Mac agrees. Okay, take a look at that picture. Okay, Mac looks really happy, but look at Ruby. Look at her mouth and her eyes, and I think you can tell how she's feeling about it. Okay? Page 226. A star again. A photo of my billboard is in the newspaper. Mac tapes the story onto my window. Each day, more curious people arrive. They park in front of the billboard. They point and shake their heads. They take photos. They come into the mall and buy my paintings. While visitors watch, I dip my hands in fresh buckets of paint. I make pictures for the gift shop and pictures to add to the billboard. Trees with birds, a newborn elephant with glittering black eyes, a squirrel, a bluebird, a worm. I even paint Bob so he can be on the billboard too. I can tell he likes the pictures, although he says I don't quite capture his distinguished nose. Every afternoon, Mac and George add my new pictures to the billboard. People slow their cars while they drive. Drivers honk and wave. My gift shop pictures now cost $65 with a frame. So how much have they gone up? They started at $25, okay, or $20, $25 with a frame. So how much more is Mac getting for a picture? Okay, here's our last page. The Ape Artist. I have new names. People call me the Ape Artist, the Primate Picasso. I have visitors from morning till night, and so does Ruby. But nothing's changed for her. Every day at 2, 4, and 7, Ruby plods through the sawdust with Snickers on her back. Every night, she has bad dreams. Bob, I say after I've soothed Ruby to sleep with a story, my idea isn't working. Bob opens one eye. Be patient. I'm tired of being patient, I say. Okay, so I want you to choose one of the characters we've really heard about today. We've heard about Ivan, we've heard about Julia, and we've heard about Mac. Well, and even George, okay? So I want you to choose one of those characters, and you're going to write things about that one character, and then you're going to do it again on Thursday. Use the same character, okay? So I will see you guys in just a little bit. Talk to you later. Bye.